Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I'm Tina Jha, you're watching Perspective. Prime Minister Narendra Modi kicked off his three-nation tour from Cyprus, the first official visit by an Indian Prime Minister to the island nation in the Mediterranean region in over 2 decades. He was warmly received by President Nikos Christodoulides and accorded a ceremonial welcome. Ahead of the official talks with the Cypriot President, Prime Minister Modi was accorded the highest honour of Cyprus, the Grand Cross of the Order of Makarios III. Humbled by the honour, the Prime Minister dedicated the award to the friendship between both countries.
Our Excellency, Rashtrapati Ji, the Grand Cross of the Order of Makarios III सम्मान के लिए मैं आपका, साइप्रस सरकार का और साइप्रस के लोगों का ऐसे हार्दिक अभिनंदन करता हूं, आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। यह सम्मान केवल मेरा, नरेंद्र मोदी का सम्मान नहीं है, ये 140 करोड़ भारतवासियों का सम्मान है। उनके सामर्थ्य और आकांक्षाओं का ये सम्मान है। ये हमारे देश के सांस्कृतिक भाईचारे और वसुधैव कुटुंबकम की विचारधारा का सम्मान है। मैं ये अवार्ड भारत और साइप्रस के मैत्रीपूर्ण संबंधों को, हमारे साझा मूल्यों और हमारी पारस्परिक समझ को समर्पित करता हूं। सभी भारतीयों की ओर से मैं इस सम्मान को अत्यंत विनम्रता और कृतज्ञता से स्वीकार करता हूं।
Speaking on the growing ties between India and Cyprus, Prime Minister Modi said the relations between the two countries are poised for greater heights. Expressing optimism, he said, we will not only strengthen the progress of our nations, but also contribute towards building a peaceful and secure global environment. Participating in a business roundtable, the Prime Minister highlighted the immense potential for growth in bilateral ties and said that Cyprus has been a reliable partner to India for a long time now. Many Indian companies see it as a gateway to Europe. From Cyprus, the Prime Minister will head to Canada, where he will attend the outreach session of the G7 summit on the 17th of June. On the sidelines of the summit, the Prime Minister will hold bilateral meetings with leaders of various countries, including Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. In view of the sharp deterioration in relations between both countries under former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, this meeting is crucial and is being seen as an opportunity to reset India-Canada relations. The final leg of the Prime Minister's visit will be to Croatia, where he is scheduled to arrive on the 18th of June, and this will mark the first ever visit by an Indian Prime Minister to this country. So the significance of the Prime Minister's key three-nation tour, which is the first after Operation Sindoor, and how it opens up new avenues of cooperation with each of these countries, is what we're going to explore and discuss on the show today with two distinguished guests. Former Ambassador Prabhu Dayal. Ambassador, delighted to have you with us on the program. Also joining us is Dr. Sheetal Sharma, Professor, Center for European Studies, JNU. Dr. Sharma, glad to have you with us on this broadcast as well. In fact, let me begin the program today with you, and let's begin our conversation with the Prime Minister's visit to Cyprus, which is the first leg of the three-nation tour and which happens to be the first one by an Indian Prime Minister in as many as 23 years. The last one was by former Prime Minister late Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee in 2002. So help us and our viewers understand, how have our relations with Cyprus evolved since then, and how does this visit of Prime Minister Modi to this island nation assume significance?
The visit is historic and something which is happening after a long period of time. And it holds many significance, in the sense that multidimensional significance of the visit. We start bifurcating this one by one. Number one, this is diplomatic. win, in the sense that after Operation Sindoor, the Prime Minister of India is going for the first time on a three-nation tour that includes something very important, the G7 meeting. At the same time, two countries which are part and surrounding Europe. So Cyprus is very important in that respect. But how do we look at Cyprus trip in another sense is that diplomatically this is going to send a strong signal or a message to particularly Turkey in the region. The reason behind this is that we understand the history of Cyprus because it's divided into the Turkish occupation and so far only Turkey has identified or recognized, the northern part of the Cyprus as its own region and the southern part. Now, Turkey, as we know that during the Pahalgam attack, Turkey was one of the countries which sided with Pakistan, and this is which actually did not go well down with India and India's allies. So that is why it is very important to send a strong message that, there are people, those who are, or there are countries or nations which are like-minded nations that stand by India, stand with India as against terrorism. And once we see that, the kind of drones and the equipment that was being used during Operation Sindoor by Pakistan, they were also supplied by Turkey. So this is a strong message that has to be sent across the global community that India stands against terrorism and there are people, those who stand with us in that, sending that message. So this is one of the very important first message that goes while the visit happens to Cyprus. Number two, yes, of course, that Cyprus may be considered as a small island country, which is although geographically part of Asia, but it is a member of European Union. And being member of European Union and Cyprus is going to hold the presidency of the Council of the European Union next year, the first 6 months on the rotational presidency. So Cyprus is going to hold a key position, and during that position, India is going to strengthen its ties with not just Cyprus, but also with the European Union, which is the trade and economic and defense and strategic ties. So that is why it is very timely that the two nations or the two heads of the state meet and then they discuss about the future course of action. Right. And the third important point in this is that Cyprus is going to be another pivotal point or a major geographically, strategically located country in the India, Middle East Europe economic corridor. So these are a couple of reasons which are very important and they stand out. And then there is a long history to it, that what was the nature of the Cold War, then the post-Cold War alliances, and then the alignments and all these things which form the background of the visit. But this is certainly a very significant visit at this point of time, I would say.
Sure. So we'll discuss the newer avenues of cooperation that the Prime Minister hinted at following the bilateral meeting with the Cypriot President. But Ambassador, let me bring you in here. And given the historical bond that India and Cyprus share, what new dimensions do you expect this visit of the Prime Minister adding to that historical relationship? Also, the fact that the Prime Minister has once again in another foreign country, even though it's a relatively small country, but the honor is quite big, and he's been accorded the highest honor of Cyprus, which once again the Prime Minister has dedicated to this long-lasting relationship and to 140 crore Indians.
Well, thanks for having me on your show. The Prime Minister has received the highest awards from a number of countries. I think it's 23 or even more. That shows the high global standing that he enjoys. And the awards which are conferred on him also are a matter of great pride and honor for India. So the award from Cyprus also stands out in this category. And it also emphasizes the fact that India and Cyprus enjoy very close relations. Now, Professor Sheetal Sharma correctly pointed out that the importance of Prime Minister's visit is multidimensional. I may mention that, as far as I see it, the most important part is that this visit is strategically a very significant move. Right. It is the first visit of our Prime Minister to a foreign country after Operation Sindoor. And if you recall, Turkish support to Pakistan was rendered all along during the fight that we were waging against terrorism and its backers. all along through Operation Sindoor and in its aftermath, Turkey gave support, which really annoyed us. Why? Because, we have tried to extend the hand of friendship to Turkey all along. We gave Turkey a lot of much needed relief assistance in the aftermath of the earthquake which occurred there in 2023. And we carried out what was Operation Sindoor. And in return, what the Turks have done is to assist a country like Pakistan, which backs terrorism and which carried out, directly or indirectly, the Pahalgam terror attack. So that has annoyed us, and certainly we want to make sure that Turkey gets our message. We have already cut off our relations with Turkey in a number of areas. We have withdrawn some of the government contracts. There has been a public outcry. Many trips to Turkey have been cancelled. And in this context, the visit of the Prime Minister to Cyprus is a very important step. And it sends across a message that India will strengthen ties with nations which are opposing Turkish influence. As we all know,
right.
Turkey occupied northern Cyprus in 1974 and tried to create a separate country called now Northern Cyprus, and that has not been recognized by the United Nations or by most countries. And Turkey is still continuing its exploitative and colonial policies. We are opposed to it, and by Prime Minister's visit, a message is going across to Turkey. Secondly, as the professor mentioned, Cyprus is very strategically located. And India is placing a lot of emphasis on the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor, because that will give us connectivity to Europe and onwards to America. Of course, at the moment, work on this corridor is halted because of the trouble in the Middle East region. But we do want to develop this corridor when things normalize. And in that context, the location of Cyprus will be very important. So in the context of India's maritime outreach in the Mediterranean Sea, Cyprus is going to play a very important role. Then, of course, Cyprus has consistently supported India in the United Nations. And it supports also India's case for a permanent membership of the UN Security Council. So by strengthening our relationship with Cyprus, we are also indirectly strengthening our areas of global cooperation. But let me also mention that Cyprus will become the chairman of the European Commission. It will have the presidency of the European Commission from next year, 2026. And with the European Commission, we are in the process of working out a free trade agreement. And we are also working towards extending our economic partnership. So as the president of the European Union, Cyprus will be able to play a very important role. Then, of course, the Prime Minister met a number of businessmen, and Turkey is a conduit of a lot of foreign investment to India. A lot of foreign investment to India comes through Turkey and through Cyprus. And Cypriot businessmen have been playing an important role in the Indian economy and will continue to do so.
Right.
So
and in fact, the Prime Minister did mention about taking this relationship forward, strengthening it in various areas. Dr. Sharma, the fact that when Prime Minister Modi and the President of Cyprus sat down and they held extensive discussions on a range of issues. The first and the foremost, of course, was strengthening the economic and commercial relations. So as far as the numbers go, the bilateral trade between both countries was around $137 million during FY24. The Prime Minister in his speech also mentioned Cyprus is a significant economic partner for India. So for the benefit of our viewers, tell us about the existing areas of cooperation between India and Cyprus. Also, which are the ones which have the potential to grow in the time to come? So when the Prime Minister asserts that this relationship will reach greater heights in the time to come, which are the newer avenues that he's referring to?
Tina, something to start with is a 137 million USD is not very encouraging. But at the same time, we have to see the size of the country with only a population of 13 to 14 lakh people. And if we look at the number of Indian diaspora there, it's hardly 10,000 to 11,000 people, those who are staying there.
Yes.
But anyhow, I would say that in international politics, size does not matter. No matter you are a big or a small country, size-wise, population-wise, economy-wise, you still matter in the global scenario because you carry one vote and you are an ally or an enemy. That matters a lot. So coming on to the second part of it, that what are the areas of cooperation? 137 million USD is something which is not encouraging. But yes, of course, Prime Minister, when he was making his speech there, he made certain things very clear in the sense that he is going to look forward to certain areas. Now, Cyprus is an island nation and there is a lot of potential in ports and marine businesses and things like that. And one thing which is very important is that we may not think of very big size, big projects in the sense of defense cooperation and other things, but things like, the small ticket programs and having a change of perception among minds of people. So, for example, if it is a small population, it is easy to get into the psyche of the Cyprus people. And this is how you tend to change perceptions about a country and then intensify, deepen, widen your areas of contact, and your intensification of relationship leads to opening of greater areas. Say, for example, tourism being one of them. India being a soft power, how can we promote ideas which are related to, say, yoga or Ayurveda and all these things which are already there? It's a small population which is easily accessible to Indian market, or at the same time, Indian markets are easily accessible to them. So, what Prime Minister is intending to say is that there are areas of cooperation in the field of education. There are cooperation in the field of innovation, science, technology, and many technologies which are very critical for the future. At the same time, many of the European countries, including Cyprus, they are important players or can be important models for energy transformation. So climate change, energy, these are the areas where we can take small steps, but that can culminate into bigger projects later on in the decades to come. But anyhow, the very fact that the Prime Minister has also been awarded the highest civilian award by the Cyprus Premier, it also indicates that the individual has initiated or taken an attempt, or he is a global leader who has attempted to strengthen the bilateral relations between these countries. Right. As Ambassador Saab was mentioning, that our Prime Minister has received, or he has been conferred many awards world over by many different countries. This indicates that his ability to cut across the thaw, come closer, and look for the avenues to intensify relationships. And this is where intensification of relationship in future with Cyprus is equally important, no matter what the size of the economy is right now, no matter what the volume of the trade is right now. But the future looks bright into these small areas and these small projects related to education, science, technology, health, innovation, climate, energy, whatnot under the sun.
Okay, Dr. Sharma, taking on from what you said about the global stature of Prime Minister Modi, also the growing clout of India in global affairs. This leads me to the question on G7, Ambassador. This is to you. India's participation in the G7 summit this year was something that was being spoken about until recently because India had not been extended that invite. But then the new Canadian Prime Minister did call up our Prime Minister, invited him. What is the reason behind him succumbing to the pressure behind having India at the G7 table? And this will also be the 6th consecutive time that the Prime Minister will be representing India at the G7 summit. Also, what key messages do you expect the Prime Minister to carry to the G7 forum when he represents India at the outreach session? What are the key messages that he will carry, given the geopolitical context, but also the fact that, we've just come out of Operation Sindoor and India-Pakistan ties, and how the world stood by India, all of that played out?
Well, first of all, let me mention that Prime Minister Carney of Canada was recently asked by the media of his country why he had invited India's Prime Minister for the G7, given the strained relationship between Canada and India. And in a very brief reply, Carney said there are some certain countries that should be at the table for those discussions, and said very categorically India is the fifth largest economy in the world, effectively the most populous in the world, central to a number of supply chains, so it makes sense. In other words, he himself acknowledged the importance of India in the global arena. And of course, there was some pressure on him from various other countries. But the important point is that he was able to resist domestic pressure and invite Prime Minister Modi for the G7 summit. And he did so because he realizes the great standing and importance of our country. Now, we come to this question, what will be the messages that the Prime Minister will convey? Of course, first and foremost is Prime Minister's unshaken belief in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. We believe that the world is one family. And unfortunately, at the moment, there are several divisive forces at work, including, of course, the most recent Israel-Iran war, along with the Russia-Ukraine war and the Israel-Hamas war. All these are dividing the world into different camps, and there is a lot of hostility, and questions are being asked whether the world is moving towards a third world war. So the Prime Minister should utilize this summit, and I'm sure he will, to sound out the other countries about how all of us can work together towards re-establishing peace and ending these conflicts. You know, the Prime Minister has repeatedly said that this is not an era of war. He has always emphasized the need for global dialogue and for resolving problems and wars and conflicts through diplomacy. So this will be a very important message that he may be conveying to the G7 leadership, which is important, you know, because the G7 countries are all important. But unfortunately, the world has become such a divided house that it's important for somebody like our Prime Minister to tell the other important global players that they have to work together to re-establish peace. Then, of course, there are various other challenges which the world is confronting, terrorism being one. And we have recently suffered the Pahalgam terror attack, but then we have been facing terrorism from Pakistan on a number of occasions in the past. And it's important that the world should realize that the threat of terrorism is global in nature. People think that the terrorist activities from Pakistan are only hurting India, but this is not correct. Osama bin Laden, whom the Americans had branded as a global terrorist, was living in Pakistan for 5 years before he was killed by the American forces who came in there. So the point is that the identity of Pakistan as an out-and-out supporter of terrorists has to be clearly understood by the global community, including by the important G7 members, because it is important to realize that terrorism is something that can hurt everybody and needs to be stamped out.
Absolutely.
Then there are, of course,
so while the Prime Minister will convey and discuss a lot of global pressing issues at the G7 summit, but at the same time, Ambassador, he'll also be holding bilateral meetings with several world leaders. And interestingly, what's going to be watched out for is his meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Carney. Given the turbulence in India-Canada ties under the former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and you know, we also how the India-Canada relations nosedived during former Prime Minister Trudeau's term. So how do you see now this visit of the Prime Minister and his meeting with his Canadian counterpart as an opportunity to reset India-Canada relations? Is there an opportunity, and how optimistic are you?
Well, you're right in saying that India-Canada relations have sunk to the rock bottom because Justin Trudeau had allowed a wide range of anti-India activities to be carried out by extremist Sikhs, and they constituted his vote bank. And when Mark Carney replaced Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister in March earlier this year, it was hoped that it could be a turning point in Canada's relations with India. And he has sent out some signals. He became Prime Minister at a time when Canada was having an escalating trade war with the United States. So he needed friends in important places, and India was considered as one such country. So he has said that he looks forward to building a good relationship with India. He has been conciliatory. Of course, it remains to be seen whether he follows up his words with concrete action. And I hope that this fresh engagement under Mark Carney may be an opportunity to stabilize ties and to restart cooperation and rebuild trust. But the important thing is that the fundamental issue which concerns India, and that is the activities of the Khalistani extremists which are carried out from Pakistan, from Canada, they have to be ended. So, from India's point of view, the most significant challenge in India-Canada relations stems from this, the Khalistani extremism from Canadian soil. And he has to help overcome it. There has to be a proper security dialogue between our intelligence agencies, and the Canadians have to be forthcoming. And very importantly, they must be prepared to take action against all these extremist elements, because otherwise the relationship cannot be repaired.
Absolutely. Dr. Sharma, India wants to normalize relations with Canada, given the fact that we had good relations, the fact that we have a significant diaspora in Canada. Two questions. What are the key issues that both sides have to immediately address before we make a meaningful breakthrough and get back to a relationship which is based on mutual respect? The second fact, given the large number of Indian diaspora, what role do you see them playing now in normalizing of relations?
Tina, once again, we have to trace this a bit historically over the decades, and at the same time, what happened in the previous regime under Justin Trudeau. Now, if I say that there were certain concerns among Indians about India not being invited as a guest or an outreach country to G7, where it has been invited for 10 times and Prime Minister Modi consecutively for many years. So this was a kind of concern that why invite has not been sent. However, Prime Minister Carney was being forced, or he was held back because of certain domestic pressures within his own constituencies, because of the kind of diplomatic thaw that happened because of Niger's killing. But at the same time, I would say the diplomatic priorities have outweighed the domestic concerns or domestic demands at this point of time. And this is very good and nice in the sense that over a period of time, since Trump has taken over and he is saying that Canada is going to be the 51st state of United States of America. This is something which is of a concern, and that is why we see Prime Minister Carney coming into power, because he had a kind of, more assertive and a bit different stand from what Donald Trump was saying. So that is why there is a kind of change in the way Canada is going to position itself on the global high table. Point number one. Number two, all the members of G7 directly, indirectly are embroiled in some of the regional conflicts, members of the European Union itself, US directly, indirectly involved in the wars all across the world in different regions. Now, how do we look at India being an outreach partner here? The invitation has been extended to Mexico also, to Brazil also, South Africa also, and Australia also, which are also big countries. But what is very distinctive about India here is that India represents the voice of the global South, which was very well indicated during India's presidency of the G20. And this is something which is very important, because you just cannot overlook India's size, economy, population, its outreach, and at the same time, its global image of being a country which stands for the countries which are underrepresented in the global order or in the world order. And that is why when G7 happens, the common format is of closed door discussions about things which are of strategic importance to the countries involved, at the same time to the world. But at that point of time, you just cannot leave aside something which is a major source of representing the voices of the half or more than half of the population of the earth. So that is why India's invitation is very timely and it is very important. And that's what Prime Minister himself said. It made sense. And that is why this is something which is a welcome step. Point number two, there are certain concerns about the demonstrations which can be held during Prime Minister's visit and on the meetings with Canadian Premier on the sidelines of the G7 summit. But at the same time, these are the concerns which are concerns, and they must be addressed both by the Canadian government themselves, because they just cannot continue to please. And now we have to also understand that Canada is also facing a kind of it may not be a very big crisis, but then the challenges posed by the Trump administration and at the same time the domestic politics. So how do they balance, reconcile the demands of the domestic constituencies, maybe small in number, the Indian diaspora, the Sikh community, which once again I would say that we just can't say that the entire community is pro-Khalistani. These are certain fringe elements which are portraying this as to be the voice of the entire diaspora, which is absolutely not true. These fringe elements exist anywhere, but then they must not be given the kind of magnitude blown out of proportion which distorts the actual image. And Indian diaspora, I think they have been eagerly waiting for Prime Minister to come and at least meet him during some of the informal meetings as business meetings or other addressing the common people. So this is something which is where Canada has a strong population of India and it has been there for a long period of time. But then confusing these as anti-India elements, the entire community, it would be injustice to the kind of nationalistic sentiment that these people have. And at the same time,
absolutely, there are sections which want relations to normalize, and they will be actually acting as the bridge when we talk about the political goodwill, when we talk about relationships expanding between both countries in areas of trade, in areas of education. So this section, of course, will be rooting for a normalization of relations. But time is running out, Ambassador. I'll take one last question because we still have to touch upon the Croatia aspect. That's the final leg of the Prime Minister's visit. What strategic or symbolic importance is attached to this visit of the Prime Minister, given the fact that this happens to be the first ever visit to this country by an Indian Prime Minister, a relatively small country, but an important member of the European Union?
Well, as you said, this will be the first ever visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Croatia. And this will be a milestone in the bilateral relationship. So I think that the visit to Croatia will underscore India's commitment to further strengthen its engagement with partners who are in the EU. Now, let me also mention that while it will be the first visit to Croatia, but nonetheless, Croatia used to be a part of Yugoslavia. And India and Yugoslavia had a very close relationship. Of course, after the breakup of Yugoslavia, the relations with each individual constituent of the erstwhile Yugoslavia may not be so good. But there is an underlying history of a close understanding, a good relationship. So Prime Minister's visit will be building on that theme. Let me also mention that the very famous president of Yugoslavia, Tito, who used to be a very good friend of our Prime Minister at that time, Pandit Nehru, and he was also a leader of the non-aligned movement. He was a Croatian. His father was a Croatian, mother was a Slovenian. Right. So there was a close relationship between Croatia and India in that sense. Now the effort is to rebuild that, and I'm sure that a Prime Minister's visit will take the relationship forward in a very significant way.
Certainly. The Prime Minister is in fact scheduled to meet the top leadership, the President and the Prime Minister of Croatia, and they together will be exploring opportunities to further strengthen this relationship between India and Croatia. With that, we'll have to wrap up the conversation. Time allows me to take up only that much on the program today. Once again, thank you, Ambassador and Dr. Sharma, for joining us on the program, sharing your thoughts with us and our viewers. To you viewers, thank you very much for your time as well.
To watch more programs of Sansad TV, subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to like and share them.